At 04:43, the fluorescent lights in the debriefing room buzzed low and steady, casting a pale shimmer over the matte black mission board. Captain Rachel Lin sat in the second-to-last row, her hands wrapped around a stained ceramic mug, the 421st Fighter Squadron logo on its side barely visible after too many deployments and base relocations. She'd arrived at 04:05 20 minutes before anyone else, just as she had every day for the last 18 months. The walls were bare except for a laminated checklist on the far end that listed comms protocols and emergency frequencies in red font. Major Keller stood at the front of the room in pressed fatigues, tapping through the mission slides with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he would never be questioned. Rachel watched quietly, memorizing the data ISR flight corridor, heading 122, altitude 28,000 feet, ROE status yellow. This wasn't new to her. She'd flown this route 6 times. That wasn't why her name had made it onto the manifest today. As pilots began to trickle in around 04:52, laughter filled the corners of the room in short bursts. Lieutenant Avery and Lieutenant Moss took the row in front of her, smelling faintly of coffee and dry shampoo. They didn't greet her. Most didn't. One had nodded once, maybe 6 weeks ago. She didn't expect more. Major Keller cleared his throat at 05:00 sharp. His voice was clean, controlled, and loud enough to cut through the low hum of side chatter. 4 Raptors would form the lead elements of the mission. Call signs Ghost 1 through 4. The 5th element, he explained, would be a backup escort asset in trailing formation. His eyes briefly scanned the room before landing on her without saying her name. Everyone knew who it was. Everyone turned. Rachel didn't blink. She kept both hands on her mug and her gaze on the projected screen. Someone in the corner whispered, "She's still flying. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. Just one of those muttered facts that hung in the air too long to be harmless." Keller moved on. Standard air cover. ISR platform is a modified RC-135. Expect clean skies. No cross-border escalation forecasted as of 04:30, brief from CENTCOM. The words passed through the room like vapor, everyone pretending they didn't see the current bubbling just beneath routine. Rachel kept listening, not because she expected to be called on, but because habit didn't know how to die quietly. Avery turned to Moss and tilted his head toward Rachel with a smirk. "Somebody's checking off flight hours again." Moss chuckled, low and quick. It didn't sting. Not anymore. Being overlooked was easier when you stopped expecting to be counted. She wore the same olive-drab flight suit as them, but the shoulder patches had been sewn and removed so many times they no longer laid flat. Her boots were scuffed in the heel from pre-flight walkarounds no one asked her to do. Her helmet sat on the chair beside her, polished and ready. She hadn't flown a lead sortie since Seven Pines. When the mission was declared routine, her inclusion became a formality, official backup for an unofficial threat that no one expected to appear. Her call sign Nomad had once been uttered in the same breath as instructors from Nellis, top 5% in ACM qualifications. Now it was an administrative checkbox. At 05:18 briefing wrapped. Radios were assigned. TAC codes were confirmed. ROE reiteration was delivered flat, as if no one in the room had ever seen a weapon outside a sim rig. Rachel stood when they did, gathering her tablet and checklists with practiced economy. She passed by Keller's desk and received the same nod she'd received every time she'd flown backup brief, acknowledging, uninvested. She moved without rushing, as if every step carried the weight of her original commission date, not today's assignment. Outside, the tarmac was waking up. Hangar lights burned like halos across polished cement. 4 Raptors sat in a row, gleaming like apex predators caged for their own safety. Her F-16 waited further down the ramp, alone near a refueling truck. No ground crew leaned against it. No last checks. No crew chief shooting her a wink or asking about fuel mix. She approached silently, helmet in hand, the silence of pre-mission air settling into her shoulders like armor. One crewman nearby handed her a clipboard without speaking. She signed. She climbed the ladder, eased into the seat like she'd done 1,000 times, and stared at the array in front of her, Her fingers hovered over the switches with practiced calm. She didn't need to rush. She was the last to depart. She always was. At 05:45, the tower gave them taxi clearance. Ghost 1 through 4 moved in sequence, one at a time. Her aircraft held its position at the end, engine rumble steady and low. When her turn came, the controller simply said, "Ghost 5, you're clear." She pushed forward on the throttle. She didn't look up at the other jets. She didn't need to. At 05:51, the sky turned gold behind the mountains. The light made everything look clean, weightless, even the past, even her name. She always arrived before sunrise. At 04:00 sharp, Rachel Lin walked past the flight ops building, through the south gate, and out to the ramp like she still belonged there. The hangars were closed, their overhead lights throwing long shadows across the pavement. Nothing stirred except the wind curling through the chain-link fence and the familiar hum of the power units cycling inside the maintenance bay. She liked it that way. The silence made the air feel clean. Her boots clicked softly against the concrete as she moved between aircraft, her checklist already in hand, though no one had assigned her one. The Raptors weren't hers. Neither was the new F-35B parked near the far end, still gleaming from its final maintenance wash. She didn't care. Her eyes always went to the older birds, the Block 50 F-16s and the few remaining A-10s grounded along the northern apron, the ones she used to know like muscle memory. She reached tail number 0319, paused, and looked up at the nose like greeting an old teammate. The A-10 hadn't flown in weeks. Its GAU-8 sat dormant beneath the fuselage, paint chipped along the outer casing where the crew hadn't bothered to touch up. She placed a gloved hand against the intake and checked for debris. Nothing but dust. Still, she ran through the motions. Intake, flap positions, gear doors. She wasn't cleared to sign off on anything. She just did it. Inside the flight sim trailer by 04:35, Rachel keyed in her login and pulled up a radar masking exercise she'd seen a dozen times. It still held value. She rewrote the scenario's initial conditions, changing terrain overlays, simulating a mid-level ECM field, just to see if she could identify the ghost contacts through clutter. She didn't need to. But something about watching that faint signal blink on and off again across the map gave her the same feeling she used to get in the air. Quiet certainty. A pulse of clarity. By 05:10, she was downloading a copy of the updated ROE playbook. She didn't have the clearance to act on it. That was the part they'd taken. Not the wings. Not technically. But the authority. No one said it aloud. But she knew. You don't get sent to permanent backup rotation on combat patrols unless someone up the chain thinks you're a liability. It hadn't always been this way. 3 years ago, she flew A-10s out of Al Dhafra. Back then, she was on QRF, top 10% in ground support accuracy. Her stickwork during low-altitude approaches earned her the call sign Nomad after a week of sandstorm sorties without a single airframe scratch. She knew what it felt like to trust your own instincts, to be trusted. But Seven Pines changed all of that. She had been flying trail escort during a routine reconnaissance patrol through a narrow corridor just outside disputed airspace. Routine was a lie. It always was. Somewhere near waypoint Delta 3, her radar painted a fading return that didn't belong. Small, irregular, intermittent. Possible downed airframe signature. Protocol called for confirmation from the lead. She didn't wait. She broke formation without clearance, descended to visual range, and called the contact. It was a decoy. By the time she climbed back into formation, her wingman had already reported her deviation. It took less than 6 hours for the board to convene. 12 hours later, she was reassigned from A-10s to F-16s. 36 hours after that, she was flying tail chase for ISR birds. No weapons hot, no maneuvers. Observe and report. The official note in her file: failure to demonstrate operational judgment under high-pressure conditions. Recommended non-combat reassignment. That was the moment she stopped being trusted. She never argued it. She never asked to explain that the radar echo hadn't matched decoy patterns, that the signature was too irregular for a clean spoof, that no one ever fully analyzed the return. She let them write the report, let the truth become quiet. So now she showed up early, checked what wasn't hers, studied missions she'd never fly, maintained readiness for orders that would never come. Some people called that pointless. Rachel just called it discipline. At 06:00, the ramp came alive again. Refueling trucks pulled in. Crews started calling out serials and checklists. Pilots walked from ops with mission tablets tucked under their arms and caffeine in their veins. Rachel stood to the side, watching a fresh crew prep one of the Raptors. The crew chief looked half her age. No one asked why she was out there. No one asked why she still wore a flight suit. She stayed until the pre-flight checks ended, just long enough to hear one of the new lieutenants mess up a radio call format. She whispered the correction under her breath, then turned and walked back to the sim trailer. She logged one more training run under her ID. It wouldn't count for anything on paper. But that didn't matter. Some pilots fly because they're assigned to. Some fly because it's all they've ever wanted. And some keep showing up because forgetting how would feel like forgetting how to breathe. At 07:14, the formation held steady over northern Jordan, a clean 5-ship diamond at 28,000 feet. The ISR platform they were babysitting cruised 6 miles to the east, its signal relay blinking predictably every 12 seconds. Rachel stayed in the trail position, just under a mile behind Ghost 4, adjusting throttle every few seconds to keep spacing tight. The air was smooth, the skies were clear. Everyone expected boredom. She didn't mind. She preferred silence to chatter. It gave her space to think, and more importantly, to watch. The F-16's radar was older than the Raptors flying ahead of her. Its range was limited, and the processing lag made ghost contacts more likely. But Rachel knew the quirks. She'd flown this bird long enough to understand when it was lying, and when it was whispering, something no one else could hear. At 07:17, something blinked near the edge of her scope. Sector C5, 085 degrees. She watched the signal flicker, weak return, then nothing. 20 seconds later, it blinked again. Same vector, slightly adjusted altitude. It disappeared. She adjusted gain and swept again, this time narrowing the cone. 2 pings, spaced 2.7 seconds apart. Not atmospheric, not a malfunction. Her fingers tapped against the stick, eyes narrowing behind the visor. That pattern wasn't random. Someone was painting the formation with intermittent radar, just enough to maintain situational awareness without triggering threat alarms. She knew that technique, learned it during a week-long ECM module taught by a guy from 513th EWS. Radar skip masking. The tactic required altitude control, perfect timing, and an understanding of terrain that bordered on surgical. Whoever was out there wasn't guessing. At 07:20, she keyed her secondary radio. Her voice came out low and even. Control. Ghost 5. I have possible intermittent contact, bearing 085. Signal pattern suggests active masking. There was a pause. Then Captain Romer's voice came over TAC channel, flat and clipped. Ghost 5, maintain position. We'll investigate. Copy, she said, then switched back to passive scan and kept her eyes on that blinking signal. Another sweep. Same pattern. It wasn't drifting. It was following. Ahead, the Raptors shifted. She watched their contrails fan wider as they adjusted into defensive spread. SOP. Precaution. But it still felt like they were assuming she was wrong. She leaned forward, narrowing the beam again. Adjusted filter. The contact was moving with them. Her hands hesitated over the comm switch. This was too familiar. 2 years ago, she had followed a blip like this. It had led to a decoy and a disciplinary review board. She swallowed hard, let her hand fall away from the mic. At 07:22, every radio on the TACnet cracked open with static so dense it buzzed through the cockpit, the kind of white noise that made you flinch. It lasted 3 seconds. Then it cut. A voice came through, calm, male, faint European accent, no encryption. Ghost flight. This is an external contact requesting direct comms with call sign Valkyrie. Rachel's heart stopped. There was silence. Absolute. Not even a cough or a mic click. Ghost 1. This is Control. Do you have verification? Negative. Control. Ghost flight shows clean radar. No visual. No identification. The voice returned. I repeat. I seek only dialogue with Valkyrie. Rachel didn't move. Valkyrie? Ghost 1 came back online. Do you have any idea what this is? Her throat felt tight. Negative. Ghost 1, she said slowly. No known contact. But the words were already burning in her mouth. Because she did know. Not the voice. Not exactly. But the cadence. The restraint. It was like hearing the echo of a conversation you hadn't meant to remember. It smelled like 7 pines. At 0724, Control's voice joined. Unknown contact. You are broadcasting on a secure military frequency. You will cease transmission or be designated hostile. The response came instantly. I am not a threat. I am not armed. I am only here to speak with Valkyrie. She knows why. Rachel gripped the stick tighter. Her HUD remained clean. No IFF returns. No transponder. But something was out there. She keyed her mic. Control. Ghost 5 requesting permission to engage secondary channel with contact. Ghost 1 cut in immediately. Denied. Stay on formation. No further deviation. Then another voice. Older. More measured. Ghost 5. This is Colonel Myers. Acknowledge request. She exhaled. Sir, the contact is using specific phrasing tied to Operation 7 Pines. I believe there is classified context requiring attention. There was a long pause. Then proceed. Ghost 5. You are authorized to monitor and assess. Do not deviate formation. Weapons cold. Copy, she said. She switched to an auxiliary channel and keyed open. This is Valkyrie. I'm listening. The voice replied without hesitation. Hello, Rachel. Her breath caught. You have me at a disadvantage, she said quietly. No, I don't. You saved my life. 3 years ago. You broke the chain to do it. And suddenly she saw it. A fading transmission. Screams over an unsecured channel. Gunfire from somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. A voice yelling not in panic, but in command. Orders spoken from the wrong side of the line. And her F-16 spiraling through cloud cover while a C-130 tried to outrun its own death. That voice had been in her headset when the world went sideways. You were at Pines, she said. The voice softened. You shouldn't be flying backup, Valkyrie. Not after what you did. She didn't reply. At 0727, the radar pinged again. Same contact, same distance. Still trailing, still watching. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. At 0731, Colonel Myers gave the order. Ghost 5. You are cleared to ascend. Weapons cold. Maintain independent channel. Return on command. Rachel acknowledged without hesitation. She pushed the throttle, adjusted climb angle, and felt the frame of her F-16 press against her spine as she broke out of the formation and began her ascent. Her HUD updated as the altitude ticked upward. 28,000. 32. The air thinned. The cockpit fell silent except for the subtle whine of pressure compensation. At Angels 40, the earth curved at the edge of her vision, and the sky was no longer blue. It was indigo, almost black. That was when she saw it. It didn't appear on her radar. Not reliably. The signal blinked like a faulty bulb, half invisible even at close range. But visually, it stood out the way absence stands out in a pattern wrong in a way her brain couldn't dismiss. It held position 3 miles out. No visible markings. No nav lights. No transponder ping. And it didn't fly like anything she knew. The aircraft's surface shimmered, catching sunlight at impossible angles. Its fuselage curved sharply in places, flat in others, as if someone had designed it to cheat physics, not obey it. The wings swept low and wide, blending into the body like melted steel. Its canopy was dark, seamless. Rachel stared, feeling the distance between her and the rest of the formation widen by more than just miles. She keyed the auxiliary frequency. This is Ghost 5. Visual acquired. Unidentified aircraft holding steady at Angels 40. No aggressive posture. Awaiting response. The reply came in a moment later. Welcome, Valkyrie. Her breath caught. She knew that voice. Not clearly. Not by name. But something in its weight. Its delivery. Had lived at the edge of her memory for years. It didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to a moment. You look good in the air, the voice said, as if they were old friends and nothing about this situation was extraordinary. Identify yourself, she replied, voice steady, but her hands tightened slightly on the stick. I think you already know. The black aircraft tilted gently to port, adjusting to mirror her altitude and heading. No sharp movement, just presence. She saw no visible weapons, no heat bloom, but she didn't relax. Not yet. She narrowed her eyes, replaying old transmissions in her head. A firefight over unstable terrain. A broken call from a voice on the wrong side of the border. A pilot speaking English with Russian cadence, giving target vectors not to intercept but to extract. Petrov, she said. There was a pause. Then in the flesh, or what's left of it. Rachel didn't speak. Her pulse kicked up in her neck. You were supposed to be dead, she said at last. I was supposed to be a lot of things, he replied. None of them stuck. Her canopy reflected the sky behind her. A sea of black stretched tight across the edge of dawn. She blinked and looked at the shape beside her again. It hadn't changed. Still wrong. Still real. This aircraft is unknown to every NATO spec sheet I've seen, she said. That's the idea. I built it. Mostly. Took pieces from a few places that don't exist anymore. You're flying a ghost, she murmured. He laughed quietly. That makes two of us. Rachel sat back in her seat. She wasn't scared. Not yet. But she wasn't grounded either. It was like floating in a place where nothing had weight. Why now, she asked. Because it's not just you they're watching anymore. And because you were the only one who didn't follow orders that day. You saved me. She didn't reply. He paused. And I need you to do it again. At 0736, Rachel held formation with the unidentified aircraft, altitude steady, the sky above them so thin it felt like floating between worlds. Her hands rested loosely on the throttle, eyes locked forward, but her focus drifted. Petrov's voice was still in her headset. Lower, now. Stripped of performance. He wasn't selling anything. He was remembering. Seven Pines wasn't a failure, he said. Not in the way they told you. She didn't answer. Not yet. He continued. The operation was never about extraction. There was no viable target, no confirmed survivors. The entire package was built around the cleanup of loose threads. Witnesses, operatives, field techs, you, me. Rachel's pulse slowed, not sped. A strange, leveling kind of calm spread through her chest. She didn't believe him. But she didn't disbelieve either. That voice you followed, the one they said was bait, that was real, one of ours. She was trying to exfil. That's why you broke formation. That's why they buried you. Rachel's mouth felt dry. The taste of recycled oxygen clung to her tongue. Her eyes flicked to the console. Her F-16's radar showed the ISR platform still cruising steady to the south. She glanced back out at Petrov's plane. It hadn't moved. You're saying it was intentional, she said. No, I'm saying it was orchestrated. He let the words sit for a beat too long. You think it was just you who got burned, he said. There were 11 crews on that mission. 4 never filed reports. 2 went off the grid a year later. 3 were reassigned. And the rest died clean. No flags. No autopsies. Rachel blinked. Once. Her fingers pressed lightly into the side console, just enough to feel the cold metal edge. Her brain tried to organize what he was saying into pieces she could push away. It wasn't working. Why now, she asked again. Because they're sweeping the board. Valkyrie, the ISR drone you're flying escort for. It's not running terrain maps. It's gathering biometric profiles, voice data, heat signatures, cross-indexing with archival records from black sites that don't officially exist. He paused. Your name showed up 3 days ago. In a flagged conversation inside the ARC network. Internal. Encrypted. Somebody referenced Valkyrie Drift. You know what that means. She didn't answer. It means they're getting ready to close the file on you, permanently. Rachel inhaled through her teeth. The breath rattled slightly in her mask. Why warn me? Because you saved my life. And because I'm tired of hiding. The cockpit buzzed faintly, not from interference, just her own skin, her pulse tightening at the edges. Her mind replayed every briefing that had dismissed her concern, every evaluation that cited judgment as her weakness, every moment that had made her think she was the problem. She looked at the dark shape off her wing. The aircraft barely shimmered now, holding steady in the windless silence of 40,000 feet. She spoke quietly. What do you want from me? At 0740, Rachel's heart pounded steady against the harness straps, but her hands never left the throttle. She toggled COM 1 and keyed in, voice clear. Control. Ghost 5. Requesting altitude deviation. 1,000 feet climb. Heading 114. Possible classified recon objective. Weapons. Cold. A long pause filled her headset. Ghost 1 responded first. Negative. Ghost 5. Maintain vector and formation. ISR integrity is priority. Rachel kept her tone level. Control. This is Ghost 5. Recommend deviation for visual confirmation. Suspected SIGINT relay in unmarked grid. Ghost 1 snapped back. Denied. Stay on formation. Do not pursue. But the next voice on the channel wasn't hers. This is Colonel Myers. Ghost 5 confirmed transmission time and heading. Rachel exhaled. Affirmative, sir. Transmission at 0736 bearing 114. Possible active relay camouflaged as civilian signal node. Another beat of silence. Authorized. Weapons cold. 2-minute deviation. Maintain independent comms. Report status on contact. Copy, Rachel said. She toggled COM 2, dialed the auxiliary frequency, and increased RPM by 2%. Her F-16 shuddered gently as it accelerated out of the diamond. The rest of the formation shifted to allow clearance, but she didn't look back. Ghost's aircraft fell into a shallow arc, banking ahead of her at 2 o'clock. She adjusted IFF settings, switching to passive ID and zeroed transponder return. Her HUD went clean. No trail. Just air. She climbed to 41,000. The contrails below faded, leaving only sky. Flight protocols rolled through her mind like a checklist. Fuel remaining. Oxygen pressure. Radar gain. RPM. Engine temps. She checked each one twice. She needed the discipline now, not the doubt. Petrov's voice returned, low and quiet. You're close? See that ridge? Rachel shifted her scan. The topographic data flickered where elevation dropped off near a no-fly zone. But there at the edge was a faint glint. I see it, she said. The aircraft leveled beside her again. Petrov didn't say more. Rachel slowed her throttle, dropped to 39,500. The glint resolved into a structure, flat, square, partially embedded in terrain like a storage facility. But something was wrong. Her radar gave no return, no thermal profile, but visual confirmation was absolute. She flipped to IR mode. Nothing. That's when she knew. It wasn't just unlisted, it was buried, by design. She scanned the horizon, flat, empty. Petrov's voice cut in again. That's where it started. Everything we lost, everything they denied. Rachel swallowed hard. Her mouth tasted like dry metal. She made a slow bank, circled the ridge, and saw the dish, a narrow-band relay, disguised as geological radar, shielded, mobile, with a faint signal loop still running. She tapped her comms. Ghost 5 to control. Visual confirmation. Target identified. Request extraction of coordinates for relay located at. Static? Then silence. She toggled frequencies, tried control, tried Ghost 1, all channels blank. She looked at Ghost's aircraft. He hadn't moved. They're jamming you now, he said. You're not just looking at history. You're in it. Rachel stared at the console, at the ridge, at the silent sky. For a moment, Everything stopped. Then she took her pen, logged the GPS manually on her legboard, and switched COM1 to encrypted burst. 2 clicks, 1 pause, 2 again. A code, legacy, outdated, but traceable, if someone still remembered. Then she pulled back on the stick and rejoined Ghost. Her career didn't matter now. Only the truth. At 08:12, Rachel's wheels touched down on the tarmac, her F-16 rolling smooth but heavier than it had ever felt before. The sky had lost its edge, the horizon calm, but the air still trembled inside her suit. She taxied slow, methodical, running through shutdown without a word. By the time she popped the canopy, a cluster of figures stood beyond the line crew. Dark uniforms, clipped sleeves, intelligent stripes. They didn't wave. They didn't need to. She stepped down. 2 men approached, no greeting, just a nod and a motion. Captain Lin, you'll come with us. Inside the debriefing building, she was guided past the usual secure rooms and into a smaller space. No nameplate, 1 camera, a single folder already waiting on the table. They asked her about altitude, about heading, about the signal they lost at 0742. One of them leaned forward when they said the word unauthorized. Rachel spoke when needed. She kept it brief, clear, but her eyes didn't flinch. Not once. What did you see? She paused. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. They pressed again. She didn't elaborate. Not on Petrov. Not yet. Their pens moved anyway, scratching notes into silence. Then Colonel Myers entered. The door opened quiet. He walked in without urgency, holding a manila envelope, not looking at anyone but her. When he set the folder down, he didn't sit. He opened the flap and slid out 4 glossy photos, satellite overlays, still frames from her HUD. One clearer than the others showed the unknown aircraft, caught between radar pings, body shimmering against high-altitude haze. He tapped it once with his finger. "You weren't hallucinating," he said. She didn't answer. Then, more quietly, "That pilot, Petrov, we've known he was alive, but no one could prove it. Until now." He sat across from her, folded his hands. 3 years ago, he was working Black SIGINT, deep cover. Very few people had his name. Then he walked away, refused an order, disappeared. Rachel didn't look away from the photos. Myers glanced toward the camera, then back at her. "You'll be reinstated," he said. "Full flight status. Operational review begins next week." Her hands didn't move, but something inside her released, slow and quiet, like steam from a cracked pipe. "We need to find out what he knows," Myers continued. "And he won't talk to us. But he might talk to you." She nodded once. No promises, just recognition. As she stood to leave, he added one more thing. "You did the right thing up there. Not everyone would have had the nerve." She paused at the door but didn't turn. "Not everyone saw what I saw." She walked out, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't follow her. At 06:04, the flight line at Nellis was quiet except for the soft shuffle of boots and the metallic echo of pre-dawn checks. The Nevada sky cracked open in slow gold, casting long shadows from the hangars and shimmering faintly off the canopy glass of the F-22s. Rachel stood near her aircraft. Flight suit zipped clean. New name patch pressed flat across her chest, Valkyrie. 2 weeks had passed. Her clearance had returned. So had her wings. But today wasn't about the mission. It wasn't about orders. She looked east, toward runway 03R. No movement yet. Just the desert holding its breath. Her Raptor gleamed behind her. They'd assigned it fresh out of depot, a quiet nod. Maybe. That what was lost wasn't forgotten. She kept her headset on, not scanning for a call sign. Just listening. An open frequency. An unencrypted channel. Nothing scheduled. Nothing logged. At 06:17, a dot appeared in the sky. No AF, no transponder, just vapor trails where the air thinned at speed. It grew from a shimmer to a shape, sleek, angular, almost familiar. The wheels kissed the ground like they remembered it. No tower request, no escort, just a shadow returning to its place. Rachel brought the mic to her lips. "Welcome home, Ghost." A pause. Then, Over the crackling headset, the voice returned, steady, human. Took me long enough. Rachel smiled, just slightly. As ground crew began to move, she stayed still. They could strip your rank, ground your wings, rewrite your record until no trace remained. But they could never erase the name survivors whispered when they needed someone to come back for them. Valkyrie,